Post Beyond Light launch, sunsetting exposes massive loot issues in D2. Before we get into the meat of the discussion, I think it would be wise for us to go back to the director's cut from February 26, 2020 and break it down a little bit. Luke breaks it down saying that they are not fueling the aspiration engine, aka gear and weapon pursuit, and that they are laying new focus on making this better. He states, in Destiny 2 with Infusion, it's like having every card you own in Magic available and playable in all formats forever. It passively creates power creep, which also means our teams need to spend more and more time retesting and supporting old stuff instead of making new stuff. It reduces player desire for new items, which dismantles aspiration, and it means that we ultimately create a ton of gear that doesn't have any value beyond ticking the box on the I got it checklist. He goes on to talk about how weapons back in the VoG era could be powerful, unique, and rare. That the game design at the time supported weapons having space to be different. He states, it's hard to cleave out that space in the current version of Destiny 2. Weapons that are supposed to come from pinnacle activities like raids or trials don't really have space to breathe. That answer can't just be make them better, because that approach ends up with the reckoning situation I described last year. Luke wants to refuel aspiration and give players more powerful, unique, and rare loot. In the current system, they cannot do that. It'll continuously push power creep, since the weapons that you already have will last forever. That means they have to design things like Reckoning, which completely devalue and degrade their own content design because the player is so strong. Here's the most important quote from the entire director's cut. In the world we're imagining, we'll have space at the top end to create powerful legendary weapons. Legendaries that are just better than other items in the classification. We will be able to do that because the design space for weapons will expand and contract over time. Items will enter the ecosystem, be able to be infused for some number of seasons, and beyond that, their power won't be able to be raised. Our hope is that instead of having to account for a weapon's viability forever when we create one, it can be easier to let something powerful exist in the ecosystem, and those potent weapons entering the ecosystem mean that there's more fun items to chase. Changes like this also mean that legendary weapons or their talents that would be shelved could be reissued at a future date, or could be brought back in fun ways by involving our community. The more specific nitty-gritty for this will come a bit further down the road, but we wanted to get some thinking behind it to you sooner rather than later. The simplest version of how it is going to work is that legendary weapons will have fixed values for how high they can be infused. Those values will project the weapon's viable and endgame lifespan, and we think that lifespan is somewhere between 9 and 15 months. One final note, we are not applying this to exotic weapons at the time. We want to iterate on the legendary ecosystem first. So he is hinting here that they may do this to exotics in the future once they iron out this legendary sunsetting system. Luke is saying here that with sunsetting, the kings at the top will be dethroned. Things like Recluse and Mountaintop will be capped on their infusion. This gives them room to create new kings that will sit at the top of the legendary power pyramid, and that these new kings will only last between 9 and 15 months. And keep in mind, this was created to affect the endgame. This is created for things like raids, trials, dungeons, nightfalls, and Iron Banner. Now it's time to get into the fucking meat of this discussion. I understand the resentment for sunsetting and understand the pain that people will feel having almost all of their legendary weapons no longer being endgame viable. Sunsetting is logical, and sunsetting is here to stay, and those who are too emotional about having guns taken away need to face the reality and focus on criticizing the real issues. I still fully support sunsetting, even in the current environment of the Beyond Light launch. Using the same weapons for over a year is tiring. It's gotten old in the past, using Mountaintop Recluse for forever is just, it's not a sustainable system. Right about now you're probably thinking, is this guy off his rocker? What about sunsetting armor? What about reissues? We will get into that in a moment. Here's a quote from Joe Blackburn, the assistant game director in the Destiny 2 dev update on December 8th, 2020. After covering things we'd like to change, I want to spend some time talking about what must stay the same. Destiny is a game built on exciting rewards. From Bastion to Ikleos SMG to Falling Guillotine, the rewards over the past 12 months have continued to evolve in the way Guardians play the game. In Beyond Light, I believe the rewards team nailed it again with an incredible new selection of legendary perks like Recombination, Thresh, Chain Reaction, and Reconstruction. Alongside these perks came with what I believe is one of the best lineups of exotic weapons and armor in Destiny history. But where we succeeded in quality, we failed in quantity. Even as Season 12, the Deepstone Crypt, and the full breadth of Europa weapons came online, the total count of weapons in Beyond Light is lower than we want. So, we're making a commitment now to our future annual releases that they will have more weapon rewards than Beyond Light or Shadowkeep. Committing to more weapon rewards should be celebrated. This is a great thing. But when he says, I think the rewards team nailed it again with perks, I have to disagree. Sure, I would love more weapons to chase, although without interesting and impactful perks on those weapons, they will eventually fall in the category of the checklist Luke Smith talked about earlier. What we were pitched back in February 26, 2020 by Luke Smith is not being delivered. This is the annual expansion where the juice comes from. I was under the impression that we were still going to get some Wendigos, some Recluses, some loaded question type weapons, and these have reason to exist in the new system because they will only be viable for a year. Sunsetting is not the issue. The issue is the perks. They have to hold up their end of the deal. Even with the new raid guns finally getting their own perk pool for the first time in D2, they're boring, not unique, and are mostly derivatives from pre-existing perks, which makes them not feel new. Things like Reconstruction, it's derived from autoloading holster. Chain Reaction is derived from Firefly or Reservoir Burst off a loaded question. Chain Reaction also only comes on 2 grenade launchers and a rocket. That feels counterintuitive to me. Wellspring is derived from Demolitionist. They also lack gameplay changing designs that show the player visual difference or give them a distinct feel that the perk is doing something new. The raid weapons are dope. You may disagree with me about the perks, but I have a surprise for you. On top of these criticisms, Joe Blackburn is contemplating putting the raid perks on other guns in the future. Here's a quote from the Polygon article. But as Blackburn mentioned before, Bungie doesn't want a world where the only good weapons and good perks come from the raid. As Blackburn put it, how long does Deepstone Crypt need to be out before we start carefully putting those perks on other guns? But that question is for more than just casual players who don't run raids. Blackburn used the example that Recombination, another new perk, currently can't drop on a submachine gun. What would a submachine gun with Recombination look like? We'd never know if the perks didn't trickle down to other weapons eventually. Is this bad? Well, it makes sense from the development perspective. I understand that they want to stretch out the capital of these perks that they create, but hearing this after hardcore players wait 4 years for raid-specific perks is very demoralizing. Seeing as the only raid loot with value until now were the exclusive exotics from the raids, we finally got a win with raids, and now they just want to throw them on all these other weapons. I personally disagree with the philosophy behind this and think it devalues the raid loot and the perks themselves. It will hold the perks back from being strong because they will trickle down to the rest of the loot pool later on. Let's talk reissues. Yes, I get reissues don't feel good, and I don't think they feel good in particular instances like the Gnawing Hunger, nor am I going to say that they are good, but they are reasonable for the type of game that Bungie is making and the content delivery schedule they uphold. This is a pointless argument to engage with. We have to face the reality that they will be here to stay, and if we get more perk diversity, the reissuing of some old favorites will be okay in my opinion. With sunsetting here, Armor's in a weird spot. While I think Armor 2.0 was an improvement, it still missed the mark. Armor lacks aspiration and value to an extent. I do not feel incentivized to go and farm Armor when most of the value is in the mods. Let's transition back into the dev update, where Blackburn talks about Armor. Joe says, increasing the reward team size is one of our long-term initiatives. but it is not the only upgrade to our gear rotation plan that we want to get into the oven. We envision a better solution for how armor intersects with infusion caps. The personality of armor comes from mods right now, so gaining a new piece of armor often means just trying to find a piece of armor that replicates the stat allocation you already have on a piece in your vault. While we are not ready to talk concretely about armor plans right now, we do want to get more gameplay novelty on armor itself so that looting a piece of armor in a new season has the potential to change the way you play. Hearing this talk about a second look at armor, this sounds fantastic to me. My speculation here is that they might bake the Charged with Light / Warmind style mods into the armor as perks to get more gameplay novelty on them. This is what I'm personally hoping for. It would give people gear to chase and not mods to unlock. I also think that they missed out on an opportunity here to introduce new mods that are build defining in Beyond Light, something similar to Warmind Cell mods or Charged with Light mods.
Did somebody say PvP?
I've played a fair amount of competitive, a fair amount of Trials in the 9, but no Trials of Osiris. I cannot stand the game's PvP. That's even before the recent introduction of Stasis and Beyond Light. Even saying that, if there was dope loot to chase, I would be in there pursuing it. I'm nothing special, but I got my Lunas back when comp was actually challenging. That was one of the things that compelled me to go in there. The PvP endgame had aspiration back then. But 4 years, man. 4 years of not having substantial loot injection outside of pinnacles and a rewarding progression system in PvP is just... it's just rough. I feel bad for the people who mainly play PvP and get next to nothing loot in a looter game. It's funny to think that Trials was supposedly the saving grace. Suggestions here, why not make a Crucible only season pass for weapon skins and armor skins that you get after unlocking ranks? Honestly, any additional loot would be a benefit at this point. We can look onward to Adept weapons. This is a great idea to add more layers to the endgame, but I think this is some piss poor execution. I really don't see this being a net positive. I mean, come on, negligible stat bumps and plus minus mods is... The current Adept system is an extremely underwhelming attempt at adding value to Trials, which are soon to be added to Nightfalls. They're also not pulling in anyone that is not already playing Trials, and if it gain any interest from those people, they can just tell that they are not worth chasing. These are pinnacle endgame rewards. So a lot of people make the argument, oh well, you don't want the rich to get richer in Trials because then they'll just decimate everybody. Remember whenever we had Luna's Howl and Not Forgotten, they destroyed everybody and it was so bad. I don't even play the PvP, but this is pinnacle endgame content. Where are the pinnacle endgame rewards? Why are these weapons not good? Where is the aspiration for these people that want to play Trials? The loot is the #1 vertical they have to incentivize people to go play these endgame activities, yet whenever it's the most critical, they drop the ball.
Way that I used to play Dungeons & Dragons as a kid. I didn't really care so much about the story and things like that in Dungeons & Dragons. For me, it was much more about the loot. It was much more about getting the awesome Vorpal swords and stuff like that. And so I wanted a game that was ringing true with. A game that was more about, killing monsters and getting cool loot.
This is a looter game. For all the fantastic achievements that this team has accomplished in the past few years, D2 fails at having a compelling loot system for the hardcore player. I want to be excited for loot like David Brevik in the video, but the current system does not support it. Hey Luke, I'm with you on sunsetting, but why does it still feel like I'm checking off lists? If you made it this far, this is my first video. I appreciate the watch. If you liked it, didn't like it, go ahead and hit the respective buttons down below. Chungus out.